Hey guys, welcome back to another round in the Patriot Media Room. Today we are going to be talking about a couple of important things. One, freedom of speech. Now a lot of us are familiar with freedom of speech, right? We exercise it every day, everywhere we go, every choice we make, freedom of speech comes into play. The other topic we're going to be talking about is child trafficking. Now how do the two relate? Well, both of them are manipulation of your constitutional rights and the constitutional rights of those around you. So follow me on this for a minute. Let's talk about freedom of speech first. We need to be very, very cognizant of any opportunity people can seize to violate our constitutional rights. What happens is they start on a testing level. They kind of poke the bear a little. They go after a little bit. They just see what we're willing to tolerate. And that beast grows and grows and grows. And then we find absolutely ignorant infringements on the Constitution. Now, we all know what the First Amendment says. We all know the First Amendment calls for freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, etc. What happens when we allow someone to infringe on our freedom of speech is that they backdoor things to violate it. They can't come outright and say, no, you cannot speak on certain subjects ever. Well, Facebook can, but you know what I'm saying, right? Because we would immediately recognize that as a communistic move. And so if they were to come at us full force like that and say, no, you can't speak on this, or you can't have this opinion, you can't express yourself in this way, then what happens is, sorry, notifications. They have to come at us softer. In order to come at us softer, they have to nudge it. For instance, let's talk about really hot topics like red flag laws. Do you believe that red flag laws are also a violation of your freedom of speech? Now think about that for a minute. Some may look at it very superficially and say, no, red flag laws are based upon the Second Amendment in violation of the Second Amendment, which we'll talk about later. Obviously, they're a violation of the First, Second, Third, Fourth, 14th, etc. But in relationship to freedom of speech and red flag laws, they absolutely are a violation of your freedom of speech. Now, follow me on this for a moment. You're in a red flag state where they're just red flag happy, right? You own firearms, you're kicking around rocks with your buddy one day, you're sitting out at lunch, and you say, I can't believe what's going on in the government. This is just ridiculous. Hillary's out killing everybody, and we've got crazy people in government, and, you know, if we just kill them all, they'd all be gone. You see where I'm going with this? Someone overhears that, reports you, deems you a threat to politicians or a threat to public safety or some sort of threat, and obviously you get red flagged, right? Now, here's what has become a culture in the United States. Even if you are not in a red flag state, it's become a culture to be very cognizant of what you voice aloud. Even if you're not in a red flag state, you have been exposed and thus indoctrinated to the red flag culture. And so you have probably a justifiable but inappropriate fear of expressing yourself. If you express yourself in the wrong tone of voice, the wrong volume of voice, the wrong message, in jest but dark humor, you could be susceptible to these red flag laws. You could be susceptible to undue investigation, search, and seizure. You could be subject to a multitude of negative things happening in your life, all the way from personal to professional to criminal. And so while we have not directly addressed the communistic approach of tempering what we say by an unspoken threat of retaliation, they have slowly created a culture by exposure of controlling what you say, controlling what your opinion is, controlling what you speak out on, controlling who you speak to. If you and I are sitting at a table, you might be more apt to discuss your upset with the government. If you and a U.S. senator are sitting at the same table, there's some sort of complex that occurs where you think, I can't say that to him. I can't speak that openly. Right? There's this fear, this self-induced fear that we have created within ourselves because we have been passively indoctrinated to believe that that is reality. Now, unfortunately, in the United States, it is reality. We are actually engaging in communistic behavior that is in violation of our First Amendment right to freedom of speech, and sometimes we don't even recognize it. Now they're tempering things as far as saying, don't call her she or girl, don't call him he or man, because you don't know how they identify. Don't refer to people who engage in terroristic actions as terrorists, or you're a racist or a bigot. Don't refer to your Christian faith aloud, or you are by proxy discriminating against those who don't believe the same. And so we have learned in our culture by these little examples that they have set nationwide, we'll get you, we'll get you, we'll get you, to temper what we firmly believe in, what we want to express, what we want to say. Our freedom of speech has been tempered in minute portions over the course of years, and we, unless we are very cognizant of the environment, accept it. When's the last time you saw someone stand up and have a rally for freedom of speech? Now they've even gone so far as to create First Amendment zones. Well, in this zone, you can speak. Or if you are aligned with militia or constitutional activity, and Antifa or any right-wing organization is over here having a situation, you two cannot converse. You two cannot come together. So you stay on your side and you stay on your side. Not only is that a violation of your right to peacefully assemble, but a violation of your freedom of speech. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that your freedom of speech is dependent on who it offends, who it's said to, where it's said, at what volume, at what tempo. Nowhere. What they've done is created workarounds. Workarounds are laws or regulations that don't directly say we're taking your freedom of speech from you. They're workarounds to that constitutional right to say, well, that would be a violation of their constitutional rights. So we got to work around that. We got to create a law or a regulation that says, no, you can have freedom of speech, but if you do, and we feel like it's a threat, or you're a security risk, or you're being hateful and bigoted, then we're going to go ahead and use this regulation or law against you. I would encourage you to analyze your life and think about any time in the last, let's say, 6 months that you have wanted to express yourself in a particular manner at a particular place. And outside of the whole good judgment, time and place situation, just think about ordinary things where you've said, I better not. I could get red flagged. They could see me as a threat. They could start investigating me. What if they take my job? What if they take my house? What if they take whatever it is you value? What if they harass me? If you're active in the rally circle, I would encourage you to think back to the last couple of times you've gone to a rally. Have you chosen not to engage in dialogue with someone or towards someone that is completely your constitutional right to do because you are afraid of retaliation? If you can answer yes to any of those questions, you have been violated. Your constitutional rights have been violated. We must bring awareness to the First Amendment, that being especially freedom of speech, as I am doing now. Because without freedom of speech, we cannot speak against the atrocities that are occurring in our country. Now that brings me to another atrocity, and that is child trafficking. Some may look at child trafficking and say, what does child trafficking have to do with the Constitution at all? We know the Constitution to be how the government needs to operate, our rights to freedom of speech and religion and press, our rights to bear arms, our rights to vote, things like that, right? We don't necessarily think of the Constitution and immediately say, oh, that's directly related to child trafficking. It is. And it involves a very, very dangerous aspect of our existence in this republic, and that is government overreach. Follow me on this. And this actually ties into freedom of speech, if you think about it. You have a child. Your child begins to act out. You don't know how to get them under control. In your home, manual labor is the punishment of choice. In my home, manual labor is the punishment of choice. I don't beat my child. I don't starve him. I don't torture him. I don't do all these atrocious things. But I do insist that when he disobeys, that there is a consequence. And usually that consequence involves manual labor. He does not enjoy mucking stalls. Now, let's say someone reports you and says, that's child labor, that's child abuse. They report you to CPS. CPS comes in and says, do you make your child do this? And you say, yeah, I made him shovel 4 stalls because he mouthed off to me. That CPS worker feels like that is a violation to that child, like that is abusive. That CPS worker has the power to write a report and say, this child is in danger, this is improper parenting, and I'm not sure they're safe in the home. I think we need to put a parenting plan into place. We need to evaluate the parents, we need to make sure the child's safe, and until we can do all of that, we're going to go and pull the child from the home. Now, highly susceptible children would be those without immediate family members who could take that child in. You need to understand that in the emergency placement, and I being a foster mom who adopted my son from foster care understands this system. There's an emergency temporary placement where you do not have to be a certified foster parent. It's called a kinship placement. So very oftentimes, if they come in and they remove the child goes to someone familiar to them, their aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, etc. You have 30 days to complete the case before the child must go to a licensed foster home. At which point, if no one in your family is licensed foster home, they go to a stranger. Now, follow me on this with the government overreach. Let's say a CPS worker comes in with nefarious plans. Let's say a CPS worker is not coming in for the benefit of the child to ensure their safety and well-being, but because there is a lot of money involved in obtaining children and turning them out for sexual deeds from people who are willing to pay an astronomical amount of money to engage in that behavior in the dark. Now the CPS worker, same CPS worker, has the right to whip up that report, deem that none of your family is appropriate to take the child, and place them in a home that they know plays that game. The government overreach is that they have given someone with not so much as a high school education the right to come in and evaluate you as a parent, as a person, morally, criminally, financially, etc. Take your child away. And as has been proven in the past, very recent past, multiple times, turn that child into a home where they are killed, abused, or sexually turned out for financial profit. Child trafficking runs rampant within the CPS system. If the right individuals are not put into place, if the right government oversight is not in place, unfortunately, we've seen this dynamic, this paradigm shift. And the shift has gone from regulating the CPS workers to ensure there's enough out there to investigate child abuse and that they are adequately trained to do so, to allowing them carte blanche because they can't keep up, someone figuring out there's money to be made in this, and allowing them the autonomy to go ahead and get this in progress. I cannot even begin to tell you the accurate number of children that are lost once removed from a home. The number changes daily, so I wouldn't even dare offer that number, but it is hundreds of thousands of children. Now, we're not just talking about government overreach in that form. We're also talking in religious forms, in personal belief forms. For instance, the Amish do not vaccinate their children. Many other people outside the Amish faith, the Amish lifestyle, do not vaccinate their children. They choose not to engage in that. That's a healthcare choice for their child that they have made. But there's a lot of money lost to the pharmaceutical companies if the children are not getting vaccinated. There's a lot of money lost. And one would think, well, they'll recoup it when the child gets sick from not getting the vaccinations they need. So they're not really out. That is false. They have actually done studies to show that children who are unvaccinated don't show an increase in illness versus the children who are. In fact, they've shown those who have engaged in unnecessary vaccination have shown more health issues. So by forcing them to get vaccinations, they feed the pharmaceutical company. By allowing them to get sick, they feed the pharmaceutical company. And who feeds government? The pharmaceutical company does. So let's say, for whatever reason, you choose not to vaccinate your child. I'm just using that as an example. CPS steps in and says, no, you have to vaccinate your child. We believe it to be the safest thing. We believe it to be the right thing. So we're going to force that choice on you. And if you don't, we're going to take your child away. Many, many, many cases of vaccination kidnapping has happened in the U.S. There's not necessarily a law in place if you homeschool your child. Once you get into the public school sector, yes, there are laws that exist that say if your child's going to attend, they must be vaccinated. But as far as a criminal law, there's nothing in my state in particular that says if you choose not to vaccinate your child, you're engaging in child abuse or child neglect. And so it's a workaround. They have to figure out how to get your kids into this child trafficking ring. They can't come right out and say, we're going to kidnap your child. And so then they put in parameters and say, no, mandatory vaccinations, which feeds the pig, mind you, and gives them the right to assert that authority over you. Now, that's just one example. Probably the most grotesque example of child trafficking is the border crisis, the illegal immigration crisis. Do you know that a child under the age of 12 cannot be photographed and cannot be fingerprinted by law? Are you aware that children that come across the border, if they are claimed by an adult, male or female, as their child, must be allowed through, even without a birth certificate or any supporting documents? Are you aware that they are literally, in Oliva Prieta and Nogales, Arizona, they are literally taking young children, 2, 3, 4 years old, and literally sending them over the fence to awaiting Border Patrol agents, because once they are on U.S. soil, they must be processed. And they put a little note, typically on their shirt or tied to their foot, etc., that says, here's the name, address, and contact of the person in the U.S. that this child needs to go to. And by law, put into place by your loving Democrats, those children must be turned over to those individuals. The child then goes into the system, that being the illegal immigration system of the U.S., becomes invisible because no picture was taken, no fingerprints were taken, and they were under a presumed name, and they're gone forever. Child trafficking is an incredibly lucrative, dangerous, systemic problem in the U.S. Children are medically kidnapped all of the time. Illegal immigrants are absolutely preying on these precious little children for financial gain. They are used as sexual pawns. They are abused for pleasure. They are passed around and they go unnoticed. Now, how does this relate to the Constitution? Well, let me tell you how. Under the Constitution, it says that you have a right to face your accusers. that you have a right to a speedy trial, that you have a right to be heard by a jury of your peers, that you have all of these rights in the criminal proceedings, that you cannot just assume someone is guilty, even if they crossed the border illegally and you witnessed it. They must go through the constitutional process of criminal law. They came in illegally, they were not U.S. citizens, and they must go through the constitutional process of criminal law. That is a workaround to buy time. 2, the workaround around the freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Amish do not vaccinate their children. It is against their religious beliefs. So instead of telling them that they can't be Amish, they just threaten to take their children away. And when they get their children, they gain tenfold financially. We need to start looking at the superficial actions of things. It's not that they put us in a First Amendment zone. It's why. Well, that's a workaround to violate our First Amendment right. It's not that they oppose us not vaccinating our children. It's why. Well, that's a workaround to continue to feed the pig and gain the children they need. It's not that they allow illegal immigrant children into the country. It's why. Well, that feeds the pig of child trafficking, and it's a workaround. Do you see how many times now, the audacity of red flag laws is just a direct, we're coming for you, we're going to violate your Second, Third, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, 14th Amendment rights. But do you see how many times in our daily lives our constitutional rights are violated subtly until it becomes a culture? The same is happening in child trafficking. Acceptance of child trafficking, child pedophilia, child abuse is becoming culture. If you disagree with me, I would ask you to look up a term on Google, and it is called minor attractive. Minor attracted is an adult who is attracted to children. If we were not starting, even beginning to embrace the culture of child trafficking and child pedophilia, minor attracted would not be a term in our language. What we need to do is get past superficial and say, what is the end goal? Is this a violation of anyone's constitutional right? And if so, it demands our immediate attention. Now, these are some of the suggestions that I would make to you to start addressing these. 1, advocacy. Exercise your First Amendment right to assemble. Exercise your First Amendment right to speak. Bring awareness to people who are living in a fog and incapable at the time of seeing the issue. That's 1. 2 would be get proactive. Identify the little guy running in your area, the average Joe. Ask them to advocate for you in this campaign. Ask them to fight to get into office so you can be heard. And then turn to someone such as A.C.C., American Constitution Coalition, and say, I have a perfect candidate. Can you help me with their campaign? That's what we're here for. Education, advocacy, prevention of constitutional infringement, and getting the average Joe into office to start rectifying the situation. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you have a blessed day. I'll see you on the next Patriot Media Room.